Hello there. Welcome to this Monday's paint along. My name is Allie and I do these live paint alongs every Monday at 5 Eastern right here on my Facebook page, Allie K Studio. And we paint something different every week, and I just walk you through a piece from start to finish, mostly to finish in 1 hour. And the cool thing about these is I also invite you to paint right along with me. So if you are new here, let me just explain how this works. I always like to kind of give a quick little rundown because we always have some new people. So these are free to watch every Monday at 5 Eastern, but I also have a download that has an outlines template that you can trace, which will put the outlines on your panel. You can see I have the outlines on my panel here ready to go. So if you're interested in that, you can always find that on my website, alliekstudio.com, and look under paint alongs. I see so many of you are jumping in. Hi Teresa, hi Kathy. Hi Angela, everyone who is joining me. Hi Adrian, you're painting with me. I love seeing that. Hi Dawn. Yes, please let me know if you are part of the party here and you are painting with me. So many of you paint with me live, but I know a lot of you also paint this after watching the replay. So I want to make sure everybody knows that's something that you can do. These videos are always available here on my page. Just look under the media videos tab and you can find the video again. And we also post these to my YouTube channel on Tuesdays. So that's another way to watch it. So some people like to watch it as a replay because then they can pause it and paint the steps with me, because I do paint pretty fast because we get this done in an hour. But I think many of you who are here every week and paint with me every week, you know that there's a lot to kind of pushing yourself and doing a painting in an hour, because why not? It doesn't hurt, right? You can always do it again. So yeah. Speaking of painting, why don't we get started painting? I started a new floral series. Hi Judy, you're painting, I love it. Awesome. So last week we did zinnias, and holy cow, I was blown away by how many of you joined me for last week's demo and posted your paintings, and they turned out amazing. So if you missed last week, you can still go back and do the zinnias. But I thought today would be fun to do an iris because they're just blooming everywhere right now. And I found a great photo that my friend Olga shared of an iris that she photographed, and I thought it would make a beautiful painting, and I've always loved irises. So hi Julia, first time, welcome, love seeing that. So here is where I am at here. I mentioned that I have the outlines on, so I'm gonna bring the camera in and angle it so that you can see my palette and our reference image, because I always like to kind of show the colors that I'm mixing. I'm gonna pull it away just a little bit more, and hopefully everybody can see this as clear as possible. I always have my iPad kind of right next to my palette, and some of the struggle is my iPad gets a little bit covered in paint. Some of you might also be able to relate to that, but you know what? It cleans up, it's fine. All right, this looks pretty good. Okay, so here we go. We've got the outlines on here, and what I did is I painted over them. I use a skinny little script liner brush, and I just paint over those graphite lines with a purple that I make from white, alizarin crimson, and Payne's gray. And speaking of those colors, I should mention I am using golden fluid acrylics for this demo. And if you get the download with the outlines, I include a list of the paints that I will be using. But I always like to tell everybody, if you don't have golden, you can still do the demo, okay? So you can kind of look at your paint colors, see what you have that's similar, and just kind of work with what you're able to. But I love golden, and I think it's the best. And I think, you know, if you're ready to really dive into acrylic painting, golden paints are the way to go. So, there we go. Okay, so we're going to start this demo the same way basically that I start every demo, and that is by washing in the shadows. So I'm going to make kind of a dark purple from alizarin crimson, which is like a burgundy, and Payne's gray, which is basically navy blue. So those two colors together make just a really nice kind of, not too intense purple. It's kind of like, I call it a dirty purple. So that makes a really nice tone for the shadows. So I'm making a soupy puddle of this. You guys might notice that my palettes have all these colors on them, and that's because I don't clean my palettes. I let the paint dry and then I peel it out. So sometimes when I start the demo, I have a cleaner palette than other times, but I was working on another piece this morning, so my palette's already got some color on it, but hopefully you can still see the color that I'm mixing up here. So, okay, I'm making this puddle of purple, and I am going to just start washing in the shapes over this whole piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare light to dark. So for example, I'm looking on which side of the line is light and which side is dark. So I'm going to start here up at this petal up at the top, and I can see this petal is very light and the background behind it is dark. So I'm going to start washing in my background with this dark purple color. And I'm going to just kind of go around my shapes, and that is going to make the petal there seem bright by putting dark behind it. Keep going with that. But now, look at what happens as we get a little bit further down. There's a dark shadow on the petal, and now the petal becomes darker than the background, so it's gonna flip because we've got some bright light coming in from the background. So now I'm gonna switch, and I'm going to wash this shape in darker than the background. So paying attention to those little subtleties in the shift is that's what's going to make your piece feel real and representational. So this is still dark here. We've got this little window of bright yellow between the petals. So this petal is also dark, and I am not worrying about the actual colors here. I am just paying attention to value. I'm not looking at tone. And we will worry about the colors later. Right now we're just building up the roadmap. Now this edge, the petal folds, and here it's bright and it's darker on the inside. So I'm going to catch that inside shape, which is going to show off that this is the petal folding. And so we've got this one dark, it's dark here, coming up, and now here at the edge we've got a couple of little dark wrinkles, but then this edge is bright again, right? So now we're gonna flip and we're gonna start washing in the background dark. So it's jumping back and forth. And I am using a flat tip brush. This is a Royal Langnickel number 3. I really like flat tip brushes. I feel like I can control the shape really nice, and I'm also holding it really far back, which is important to get your brush strokes nice and fluid, and it also helps you to not get too hung up on the details. So I always like to say, make sure you're holding your brush. I mean, I'm holding it even more than halfway back, but at least halfway back. Catch that little bit there. And a little thing you can do if you find yourself always getting too tight on your brush is put a little piece of tape on your brush to mark where you should be holding it. We used to do that when I would teach classes. We would mark all the students' brushes and go around and check if they were following directions by holding it where it was taped off. Okay, so here it's dark on the edge. Now in the middle of this petal, it gets dark. So we're gonna flip it and hit that dark shadow in the middle. We've got some little dark folds coming out towards the edge, and then it's real dark right here. All right, so now this one, the background is darker than the edge of this petal, but I'm not gonna bring the background all the way over because I don't want it to butt up against that dark shape. And here on this petal, I can see this dark shape right here that's coming out. Sometimes when you're starting to place value in a new area, if you get a little bit lost, I always say look for the shapes that are easy to spot. So like this piece coming out right here, this is really easy to spot. So I put that in first, and that helps me to figure out where the other shapes are based on that one. So now I can see there's this dark chunk of background that's coming in on the side here. And then we've got a fold here where we've got some shadow in the middle of the flower that I'm gonna put in. And now this whole petal is pretty light. We've got a little fold right here and then a couple of little folds at the edge, but otherwise that flower is all pretty light. So I'm gonna do the background a little darker than it, but I'm gonna leave a little window between this and the petal so that this background doesn't blend into the petal. And we'll separate those a little bit more later as we push these values a little bit more. This is just kind of the first pass at the values. So I'm pretty much, everything that I'm painting right now, I'm painting the same tone. I'm not really pushing light or dark. Got a kind of a dark stem here. I'm just washing over all that. I guess it's light on the left side of the stem. Maybe I'll stop it there. Okay, moving along, we've got a dark shape right in the center here. That's pretty easy to find, so we'll put that in right away. A little bit right there. And we've got this little dark chunk that's part of this petal that's going up. We're gonna catch that, same thing, this little bit right there. And now we've got this other dark piece that's going horizontal, so that's pretty easy to find. It comes along the edge here, works its way down. Somebody just said thank you, but I couldn't see who it was. Sometimes the comments fly by so fast, and I am trying to peek back at them, but unfortunately I don't always catch all of them. So if you guys do have any questions and I miss them, I always go back through the comments and I type in answers. So please still ask questions, make comments, say whatever you want, and I will be sure to respond to those. All right, got a little dark shadow here, a little bit of dark coming down here. Let's go back to this one because I didn't do too much there. I need to mix up a little bit more of my color, and again, this is just alizarin crimson and Payne's gray, and I'm putting a bunch of water in there. Now, as I'm mixing this again, if I don't get it to the exact same tone, that's not going to matter at all because all of this is going to get covered up. We're just creating our roadmap. Oh yes, thank you, Judith, for sharing this and for reminding me to ask you all if you are enjoying this demo. Would you please hit the share button? That really helps me so much, and you can hit share right as you're watching right now, and you'll still be able to watch the video. I shouldn't kick you off. So I would really appreciate it if you would share it because that allows a lot more people to find me. It allows me to keep doing this and offering these demos for free every week. So I always appreciate when you guys share these. Okay, I'm actually gonna go in and put some shadow over this whole piece. Maybe I'll leave a little bit at the edge to separate it from the background. But I can see this is all kind of dark in that opening. And also, if you do share it, please just let me know in the comments so I can thank you, because sometimes Facebook hides it and doesn't show me who actually shares it. So I always like to say thank you. All right. Got a little dark shadow here. Dark bit right there. And we're almost through with our first pass here of just building up the shadows. We've got a bright edge of the petal here, so I'm going to wash the background in darker. So you see how I'm not just painting the flower when I'm in this stage? I'm actually painting the flower and the background because it's all a part of the same scene. If you just focus on the flower, your flower is going to feel very separate from the background. But if you're paying attention to the values, you're also putting the lights and darks in the background at the same time. Okay, so I'm gonna put a little wash in here of the background. Thank you, Judy, for sharing. Okay, we're gonna put some dark in the background up here. Just bring that dark down a little bit. And then I think we're ready for the next pass of color. Put a little bit up there. Okay, so this, like I said, this is all kind of the same treatment of value. So this is all alizarin crimson, Payne's gray, watered down. Now we're gonna go back and we're going to do another pass of the same two colors. Let's see, Deborah said oh my goodness, it went by so fast. I'm sorry, Deborah. I saw that the comments were something about liking the fluid acrylics. And I like those because they are very intense color. And there's a lot of vibrancy there. And golden is, you know, it is a more expensive paint, but they last forever and you get so much out of them that it's worth every penny. Okay, so I'm going back with alizarin crimson and Payne's gray, and I'm going to push the darkest areas once more. So I'm first gonna look, where's the very darkest area of the painting? And I feel like it's these two shapes right in the front here, so I'm going to catch those first. And this is really like what's in the most focus as well. So we wanna get this nice and clear. So we're gonna get these shapes in there. Still not worrying about the color of the flower. We've got a little bit of this one right here and a little bit right here. We're just paying attention to the value. We've got this dark chunk here. And this is also dark along this edge and right here. Okay, so now what's next darkest? The next darkest thing I think is maybe down at the stem here. The left side is pretty dark. And then going into the background, hugging this edge of this petal, the background is quite dark. Judith is saying, why liquid versus tube golden? I don't use the tube because those are the heavy body paints. And I don't really paint with physical texture. That's a personal thing, but I like how I can dilute the fluid acrylics and really get them to move. So I just personally don't have a use for building up the texture, but some people like their brush strokes to actually have depth to them. So they like to apply the paint kind of fat. So, you know, that is personal preference. And I got a little chunk of paint here. The paint colors I think are all the same, whether you're using fluid acrylics or heavy body from Golden. So if you want to try the heavy body, you know, you can still go off of the colors that I'm using and just use that heavier consistency paint. Okay, so next darkest, probably over here. This whole area is pretty dark. Okay, and then where else do we have some dark? We've got some dark in this little window here between the petals. This is the background. Little bit of dark in the background here. So the places where I'm putting the dark in the background, it's really making the edges of that flower pop out at us. And that's how you can kind of help to draw focus to your piece and kind of make the eyes see what you want them to see. And we've just about built up enough of the shadow here. I'm going to make this petal a little bit darker, I think. Kind of dark right here. Maybe along this edge, this one's kind of dark. All right, got a little dark chunk there. And I think we're just about ready to start doing our underpainting washes. So I like to wash in a complementary color underpainting. Complementary means opposite on the color wheel. So if the top color is going to be cool, like the cool purple, I will switch and put a warm tone down. If the top color is going to be warm, I will start with a cool tone. So I don't always do the true opposite on the color wheel. I kind of fudge it and make it what I want it to be, but that's a basic rule of thumb, is if it's going to be warm, you put cool. If it's going to be cool, you put warm. So you want to make sure that this first layer is nice and dry, because if these underpainting shadows are wet, when we wash over them, it's going to pull off and kind of pull away all the good stuff that we did. So you could see I was kind of scooping up a few little puddles of paint that I have. If yours is really wet, you could just blot it a little bit to make sure that this is dry enough. But it does dry pretty quickly. So I think we'll be able to probably go in now and start putting our underpainting color in. So when I do those washes of underpainting, I switch to a bigger brush. So I'm gonna go up to my number 9 brush and just kind of squeeze the water off of it to get it nice and shaped nicely. And now I'm going to think about what colors I want to do for my underpainting. So I think for my background, I am going to do quinacridone magenta in the areas that are green. So I'm going to generalize the background and pretty much call all of it green. So I'm going to do a wash of that magenta over everything that is not the flower. So quinacridone magenta is an amazing intense color from Golden that I really love to use as an underpainting, because it's so vibrant and it just plays off of the colors that we're going to layer on top of it really nicely. So we're just gonna wash right over everything that we did, and I am not going to be particular about doing this right at the edges. You see how I got some over the flower? Totally fine. In fact, I think it's better if your edges are messy, because we are going to have loose edges on this whole painting. We're not going to have really tight, perfect edges. So it's okay to start out the painting loose, because then the rest of the painting will stay loose. So don't worry about cutting those edges in just perfect. So this is just getting a base layer on the panel. And you'll see how much fun it is when we start layering the paints on top of this. Those greens are really gonna look really cool when they're layered on top of the magenta. So I could have done some other tones. I didn't have to do the magenta. Sometimes I do like a burnt orange underneath green tones, and I make that burnt orange from alizarin crimson and Hansa yellow. That's one of my other favorite underpainting recipes, but for this one I thought the magenta would be fun. You can see it's really watered down. In the places that I know are going to be really bright in the background, I'm watering it down a little bit lighter. In the places I know will be dark, like up at the top here where I know the background's going to be dark, there I'm going to wash that magenta in a little bit heavier, because I'm just kind of setting the stage for what's happening later and building up that color. Okay, now what colors are we going to put down under the iris? Okay, let's think about it. So I think that the areas that are purple or blue, I do want to put down that burnt orange recipe that I was talking about, because the opposite of purple or blue is kind of a yellow orangey tone. So I think that's gonna look nice. So we're going to do alizarin crimson and Hansa yellow opaque and some water. So that makes kind of a darker, muddier, kind of a burnt orange. That's a good word for it. I was trying to think of something else to call it, but that's what it is. Okay, so this is gonna go over the places in the flower that are purple or blue. And it's going right over the shadows. Just dropping that in. Now we have that little window of yellow there. I don't care. I'm just gonna keep going with this. This petal is very bright, so I'm going to thin my paint out a little bit and lay this orange down a little thinner. Because like I said, I know that's going to be a brighter area, so I'm gonna keep my underpainting a little brighter. And I'm gonna do the same thing over here where I see that this petal is pretty bright. Same thing over here. Just putting it down pretty thin. Another nice thing is then it'll dry quickly. And down here, it's gonna be pretty thin. And up here is gonna be a little bit darker. I'll lay my color down a little bit heavier there. I need to make some more. It's just alizarin crimson, enhance a yellow opaque. I'm gonna wash that in right over all those shadows I built up. And the reason why we build up shadows first and we build up a base first is it always looks better to lay light over dark. So that's a good thing to think about. It's just kind of a general rule that your brush strokes when you're layering paint, if you lay down the strokes light on top of something darker, they just look nicer. At least that's what I think. Maybe they don't, but that's what I think. Okay, now we're gonna keep going. Now you're probably wondering, like, these yellow areas, I put the burnt orange and that's really not the opposite. So when I was saying before that I kind of generalized, I'm not gonna go around and pick out every single color and then put the opposite. So I just pick like the general form and pick an opposite, calling this generally a purple flower. And the areas that are yellow, it's okay to have the underpainting be similar to that. We don't have to go through each little section and find the exact opposite. Okay, so we've got our underpainting in. Now it's going to start looking like what it's supposed to, I think. So again, this layer needs to be dry. So I've got a few little drippy areas that I'm gonna go around and try to scoop up to get those to dry. And of course, if I was doing this all by myself in the studio without all of you watching, I would just go get a cup of coffee or something and then come back and it would be dry. But for right now, I'm just scooping up all the little drippies so that the show can go on. And that's what I think that's what I love about acrylic paint is it's, you know, it's so quick to dry that you can just keep going and do a painting in 1 hour. But I do have some people that do these in oil and they can totally do that. But if you did this in oil, you would probably want to let it sit for at least a day, depending on how much you thinned your paint down with a medium before you started layering your next round of color on top. Okay, but I think I pretty much have this dry. So what do we want to start with? Let's start with light purple. I want to start carving out the highlights with this bright purple tone. So I think I'm going to use, what size brush am I going to use? I'm going to use, this is my number 3. I'm going to start working with my number 3 brush. And I'm going to make that light purple, which is really almost white. I'm going to make it using titanium white. Let's see, can you see my color here? Yeah, you can see this. Okay, titanium white and permanent violet dark and a little bit of phthalo blue green shade, which is going to cool it down. I need to put more white in here. There we go. Now a little bit more purple, a little bit more blue. Oop, too much. Phthalo blue is an intense color. You hardly need any of it and it will totally change your color. So if you go in and you scoop a little bit and you grab too much, did you see how I kind of offloaded it to the side before I went into my recipe? Because if I went into my recipe with way too much of that blue, it would make my color so contaminated that it would take way too much of the other colors to like bring it back. So you try not to get too far off. I'm also gonna put a little bit of glaze in here to thin it out. So I'm no longer thinning with water. Now I'm thinning with this is a glazing medium from Liquitex. You don't have to use this one. You can use any brand of medium for acrylic paint. It's totally fine. I'm not picky about that. Okay, so let's see this color, see how this looks. All right, I'm going to go in and find the areas that are easiest to pull out first. Ooh, this is too dark. We need more white in there. Add some more white. This isn't going to be the very brightest. We will pump it up a little bit. I'm kind of starting with like a mid-tone light. All right. Yeah, and I am going to make a point to leave little bits of my underpainting, that orange. I'm going to make a point to leave little bits of that showing as I work. So I'm not filling everything in. I'm kind of leaving some spaces between my brush strokes, but I'm trying to make it not feel too calculated, where it looks like I'm leaving the same size space between every brush stroke. And again, this purple mixture is Permanent Violet Dark, Phthalo Blue Green shade, and Titanium White. So got that petal in. Now I'm gonna look and see, I've got some edges up at the top here that are this kind of bright tone. I'm gonna drop some of those in, a little bit right there. And we've got a bright edge right here. And don't worry about making these shapes exactly the same as the outlines or the reference image. You don't need to get every little variation of petal just the same. We're just picking the general forms of a flower because nobody is going to compare your painting specifically to the reference image, right? Only you're seeing that. So don't drive yourself crazy with trying to get every little wobble of the flower just the same. So I'm just going around and picking basically the lighter tones throughout. And this is just gonna start to make it start feeling more like a purple flower and less like an orange flower. All right, moving along. I'm also thinking about kind of covering up that first layer of outlines because we don't want to see the outlines. So as I'm working my way around and with these more opaque brush strokes, I am kind of chipping away at those outlines that we put down because seeing the outlines just kind of makes the painting feel unfinished. So we don't really need to keep those. Somebody said, love the periwinkle color. Yeah, I like this purple with the orange. They play off of each other really nicely. Okay, it's bright in here. And also, do you see how I am not blending these tones? I'm just laying down the color and I'm moving on. I'm not trying to blend it into anything. Because when you blend colors, what happens is it gets kind of muddy if you start mushing them all together. So I like to just pick the color that I see and lay it down and leave it alone. And that is easier said than done, I know, especially if you are a blender, and I know a lot of you are because I've heard that from you. Many of my students come from the world of decorative finishing, and that is where it's all about blending. So I feel ya, I understand. Okay, we've got some highlights up at the top here. And then we've got this edge that's lighter, that's coming down. A little bit right there, a little bit right there. Okay, I think I'm ready to move into the next color. Oh, we'll put a little bit right here. So now I'd like to put some of the darker, more true purple tones here. So I'm just going to add more of the Permanent Violet Dark and more of the Phthalo Blue Green shade to my mixture. And I'm actually gonna go quite a bit darker because I really wanna find these nice dark shapes and get that tone in there. So I'm gonna add a good amount here to make a pretty significantly darker tone. I'm gonna put a little bit of glaze in there to let some of that underpainting show through. And I'm gonna see how this looks. Yeah. I feel like this petal has like some more magenta in it, so I'm probably gonna come back and push that a little bit more. So we'll just put a little bit of this dark on that petal, a little bit right there, and I see more of it over here. A little too much. And this isn't my very darkest, like the very darkest is almost black right in here. So I will push that even darker. This is just kind of a mid-tone. And let's see, a little bit right there. And I'm thinking about the direction of the petals as I'm laying down my brush strokes. So you can see I'm kind of going with the direction of the petal. Showing that movement just makes it all feel more natural. All right, put this in too. Okay, I think that's enough of this tone for right now. Maybe we'll do a little bit right here and right there. Okay, now let's do that even darker tone that I mentioned. So we're going to put more blue and more Permanent Dark Violet into it. But what I'm going to do is I'm gonna move to a new spot on my palette. I've got a dry spot right here because I have quite a bit of white in here. So I'm just gonna scoop a little bit of this recipe up and then I'm gonna grab more of the Permanent Dark Violet and Phthalo Blue. Rather than having to put so much into this puddle to change it to what I want, I'm just moving to a new spot on the palette. So now there's very little of the white in there and it's mostly the Permanent Dark Violet and Phthalo Blue. And I'm going to put this in those really dark areas that we found when we put the shadows down. Some of it might overlap that mid-tone that I put down, that's fine. A little bit of it right there. And we've got this dark shape coming down here. Let's see, where else do we see it really dark? That might be the darkest, maybe a little bit right in here. Maybe we'll push that whole center a little darker. Maybe this center too. My paint's a little wet there, so I'm having a little trouble getting that to lay down and not mix in, but I think that works. Maybe a little bit right there. Okay. So now, why don't we let's put some of the yellow in here just to kind of anchor these areas that feel like they're kind of missing something. So let's make our yellow. I'm gonna clean off my brush here. And I'm going to make the yellow from Hansa Yellow Opaque. Let's see, can you guys see this color? Maybe if I push up my palette there. Hansa Yellow Opaque, and we will do a tiny bit of Pyrrole Red Light, a very tiny bit. And that's going to make a pretty nice like tangerine yellow. Maybe I'll just go in with that to start out with. I think I'm gonna do that. Hansa Yellow Opaque, just a tiny bit of Pyrrole Red Light. And I'm going to just drop that in. Pulling the brush, oh, see my brush got a little bit of the purple on there. It wasn't dry, so I kind of had to wipe that off. I'm gonna do these brush strokes coming out. Okay, I need to make some more. Got a little too much of the Pyrrole Red there. Back. I like Hansa Yellow Opaque because it is so opaque, and usually yellow is a very transparent color, so that's what I really like about this particular paint from Golden, is that it does have that opaque quality with yellow. Otherwise, you'd have to add white to yellow to get it more opaque, but then when you add white to it, it neutralizes it, makes it more like pastel-y, and this way you can keep the vibrancy of the yellow and have it be opaque. All right. So now we're going to go back and make a brighter yellow, but this time we are going to add some white to it. So I'm going to get a nice clean white. We don't want any white with purple in it. I got a dry spot here. And I need to get a little bit more Hansa Yellow. So I'm gonna do white, Hansa Yellow, mix those two together. And now I'm just gonna put the tiniest little bit of Pyrrole Red in there. That was too much. So you can see this new yellow is going to be a lot more of a pastel yellow. I'm gonna put that in for the highlights. So this one over here, the yellow is brighter. So I'm gonna just catch that. You can see how much brighter that is. And this one we've got towards the bottom here, because there's the shadow being cast along it. So the yellow is bright as it comes out of that shadow. And then we've got another little highlight on the yellow right here. And this one is pretty bright up towards the top. So I'm just gonna put that bit down right there. I'm gonna do a few more little bits of yellow coming out here. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I'd like to start putting some color into the background because right now I feel like the pink background's kind of distracting. So I think once we start anchoring some of this, it's just gonna make a lot more sense. So let's do that. Let's start with the darks in the background. So it's kind of this dark olive green up towards the top. So I'm going to make that olive green. Let's see, I'm going to make that from phthalo green blue shade. I have a dry spot here. And Pyrrole Red Light. The Pyrrole Red is going to neutralize my green because otherwise that phthalo green's way, way, way too green. And then a little bit of Hansa Yellow Opaque. And that's going to give us a nice olive green. I'll put a little bit of glaze in there. And so we don't want to have any white in here right now. We want this to be a pretty dark olive green. And I'm going to start putting this into the places that are the darkest. Remember, we started washing in our shadows really dark when we started. So I'm going to put this in those places where the shadows were, but I'm also thinking about leaving those little bits of the magenta popping in there because that's going to look really fun against the green. like how intense that is. We've got some dark green coming in here. And we can use this down in our stem. Our stem's pretty dark, especially on the left side. The right side's gonna have a little highlight on it. Let's see, we've got some more of this dark in the background. And if the brush kind of skips and leaves like those little drag marks over the magenta, I think that's pretty cool. So I'm okay with that. We've got some dark in the background down here. I need to make a little bit more of my green. So again, it was phthalo green, blue shade, pyrrole red, light, and Hansa yellow, opaque. And once again, it's totally fine if this new layer of olive green does not match the old one. In fact, it's probably better. So not a big deal. And that's one thing people ask me a lot. They always say, like, how do you keep your paints wet to be able to keep using the same color? And usually my response is, well, I don't. I just keep mixing the color. But I think like adding that variety as you're mixing the color, that makes it more powerful. I think it's fun if it's not always the same. So you just keep mixing. And it also helps you to get really good at mixing the colors because you're doing it over and over again. All right, so I think that's a good amount of our darkest green. Maybe we'll put some in over here. Okay, yeah, that's a good amount of the darkest green. So now let's lighten it a little bit. So let's add some more yellow to it and a tiny speck of white, like a tiny, tiny speck, because the white will mute it, and I don't really want to do that. I just want to lighten it up a little bit. I'm going to put a little glaze in there. So now this is still kind of an olive green, but it's just like a lighter version. So I'm going to use this, drop it in. And a good thing to remember is if you have a large area that's a certain color, rather than filling it with like 5 brush strokes, just do 1 brush stroke and fill in that area. So like as I'm going around this one, I'm just going to do 1 long stroke instead of a whole mess of hash strokes. So all right. And again, I'm not trying to do all of these, you know, pieces of grass in the exact same places. None of that matters. Okay, we're gonna put some up here, maybe layer some over the background, a little bit more over the pink, but I don't want to cover up all the pink. Okay, I think that's good. Now I want to go a few notches lighter with my green. Okay, so now if I look, I can see that this window here is actually really bright, right? And it's also really bright here. So I'm gonna make a totally different green. I'm going to use phthalo green blue shade, find a clean spot here, and some white, and some pyrrole red, light, and I guess some yellow. So I'm making it with the same colors, but it's gonna have a lot more white in it. And gotta keep going. A little more yellow, that's too intense. We need to put more white in there. Still a little too green for me, so I'm gonna dull it down with a little bit more red. Green's a funky color to mix. Most of the time I see greens that are painted like with flowers, florals, and usually they feel too green. I always say err on the side of making it less of an intense green, unless you're doing like a bright lime green highlight, then I think it's okay. But for your darker greens, they're really gonna be a lot more neutral than you think. Okay, I think this color will look pretty good. So this, I'm going to just start bopping around. I'm gonna go over that a little bit. I'm gonna put this in the window between the petals. It's actually showing up as yellow, but I want this to show up as the background. That's just, I think it's gonna make more sense in the painting. I'm gonna put a little window of it right there. I'm gonna put some of this bright green over here. It really doesn't show up that bright, but just for the sake of continuity, I'm going to use this green in a few places that I don't quite see it that bright because I don't want to have to make 10 greens. So we're gonna do a couple little highlights down here. And we're gonna drop it in right here where it's really bright. And I think we're just gonna keep going with this green over here too. We don't have to do all the different tones that we see in this image because it'd just be too much. Okay. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear that like lawnmower that's going in the background. Out of my control. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Okay. That is starting to make it feel a little bit more accurate. Okay, so I think I want to push the background a little bit brighter. So this is almost dry. I'm going to go back with some bright green, like mint greens in the background. So I'm going to get myself some new fresh green and I'm going to find a new spot to mix it, and I'm going to do white and phthalo green, and those two together make a pretty fun mint color. I'm going to add some more white to it. And maybe just a tiny speck of yellow. So now I don't have any of the red in there. And I'm just gonna drop these little mint highlights in the background because I think they'll be pretty. Yeah, they just kind of sparkle, especially with the magenta in the background. I'm just gonna do, you know how the background's kind of blurred? There's like an indication of another iris back there, but we're not going to go into too much detail back there, but we're just going to kind of catch, you know, the essence of having some light back there with this little mint color. Same thing on the edge, I think. Do a little bit of that on the edge. And it's pretty bright in here underneath this petal, so I want to put some of that mint in there. And maybe just one more right there. Okay, maybe that's enough. All right, so now that I put those bright greens in the background, now I feel like the highlights on the iris need to be brighter because these first bright purples that we put down, they don't feel that bright anymore because we put that kind of minty bright blue or greenish blue in the background. So now we're going to push these highlights on the iris a little bit brighter. So we'll go back to our same recipe, which was white and violet and phthalo blue green shade, but we're just adding a lot more white to it now. So this is gonna be like almost white where we're gonna put these highlights in. So I'm gonna mix it up and then I'm gonna check and see if it's bright enough. Not quite bright enough. I want it to be definitely brighter than the first layer that I put down. So I'm actually just gonna squirt a little white right into my puddle and try it again. So I'm gonna make this really opaque, which means I'm not putting any glaze in this mixture now. So when I do the brightest highlights, I usually don't add any glaze because I really want them to sit on top of what's there. So let's try again. This feels a little bit better. We'll try dropping this in and see if this stands out enough. That's getting there. We may need to come back with one more pass of a bright purpley white, but let's try this for right now. And it's pretty bright over here. You can see how I'm changing the direction that my brush lays down the stroke to get it to jive with what I'm trying to do here. So I'm kind of going with the flower. I've got this fold that comes out right here. Another piece that comes out right here. Go down there a little bit. Let's see, Liz is asking, what brand of brushes do I use? Liz, these are Royal Langnickel brushes, but one thing I have to mention is I can't find these in individual brushes or even individual packs. I actually buy a teacher pack of 60 brushes. And so it gives me like 4 or 5 different sizes, and then it just gives me multiples of all of them. But it's a really great option because the 60 brush pack is like $50, and that'll last me a really long time where I can just throw the brushes away when they get old. So I've only seen this particular brush in that 60 pack, which I believe is from Dick Blick. But sometimes I get Dick Blick and Jerry's Artorama mixed up. So I'm pretty sure I get this from Dick Blick. And again, it's Royal Langnickel if you do want to invest in like a big pack of brushes. And that's what I do. One of these times I will, I'll post a link to it. I'll show you the pack that I buy in case anybody's interested. So I'm just kind of going around and finding those areas that I feel are the absolute brightest, and I'm just adding this extra layer of brighter purple here, which is going to give it a lot more depth, a lot more, you know, pop against the other colors. So building up all these values, that's what creates, you know, all this drama in the piece and makes it feel realistic. Even though we're having all this fun with the brush strokes and the color, it still feels like the photo because we are being accurate with the value. All right, moving along. Okay, one more thing I want to do. Let's see what time it is. Oh, we're almost 6. So yeah, a couple more things that I just want to drop in. You guys always know I do my final little touches at the very end. I want to do some of these like warmer magenta purple tones that I mentioned that are kind of hanging out on some of the petals. So Carol's asking, can I show the glaze again? So it's Liquitex glazing medium, but I am not particular about this brand. So any brand of glazing medium or matte medium it might be called is totally fine. Okay, so this magenta purple I'm going to make with quinacridone magenta. This is dry. And the permanent violet dark and white. So now this time I don't have any of the phthalo blue in there like I had before. So it's quinacridone magenta and the permanent violet dark and white. And so I think putting this kind of more pinky purple tone mixed in with all the other ones that we have going, I think that's going to be really fun. So I see this pinky purple on the edge of this flower. Might need some more white in there. I need it to stand out a little bit more. It feels a little bit duller than what I'd like. I might have to build it up a little bit, but I do like having the variation with this tone. We'll put a little bit over here too. And a little bit over here. Where else do I see it? I see a little bit coming on this one. And maybe a little over here. Put a little down there just for fun. Okay. So I need that to dry, I think. I'm trying to get this really bright little bit right there, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try going in with just magenta and white without that purple, and maybe put a few little bits of that in there. Maybe just a tiny speck of purple. So this is gonna be mostly magenta and white with a tiny little speck of purple. And let's see how that, yeah, I like that. And that kind of like mirrors the underpainting with the overpainting, because we had this intense magenta in the underpainting. Let's see, I noticed I've got a section here that's in the background that's supposed to be that dark, and I want to bring it down just a little bit more because I feel like that's going to shape up the edge of that petal a little bit. I just want to get in there and clean that up just a little bit. So I leave a lot of the underpainting showing, but then I can always go back and kind of tweak if I feel like here and there I want to clean it up a little bit. Just kind of cleaning up a few of these shapes. And that's something you can do when you've got more time than what I have right now. But yeah, I like that. Now I want to come back with almost straight white and put the very brightest highlights on the flower. But what I think will be fun is I'm actually just going to do a little speck of phthalo blue in my white. So I'm going to find a place to mix it. Okay, this is going to be straight white with a tiny speck of phthalo blue, almost totally straight white. And we're going to use this for the brightest highlights on the flower. I used too much phthalo blue already, I think. I'm going to have to test it, see how it looks. Yeah, I need more white in there. I really want it to stand out just a little bit more than what it is. Okay. So I like to leave the brightest highlights for the end, and I don't put them everywhere. So I really like to stress that. If you put the brightest highlights everywhere, they lose their impact because they're everywhere. So you have to kind of use them sparingly for them to have the most bang. And that's why I save them for the very end too, because then I can just decide where it needs to be the absolute brightest and drop them in those places. And I'm probably already doing a little too much. See, put a few more here. We're getting close to being all done here. Again, let me just say thank you for hanging out with me and watching this, and also special thank you to those of you that hit that share button and shared this video with your friends. I am very grateful when you do that. If you haven't done it yet, I would love it if you would. Okay, let's see. There's this one shadow down here that we left as the burnt orange, and I feel like I just need to put a little something in there. So I'm gonna go back to that first purple color and just put a little bit of that in. I'm gonna thin it out with some glaze just to fill in that little window. All right, let's see. A few other little windows. I think this one's done. I'm gonna call it done. Maybe. You know what? I want to put a few little more yellowy green bits in the background. Will you guys just hang out with me for a few more seconds? I'm going to go back to that mint green, and I'm going to put a little more yellow in it and a little more white in it, and just drop a few little yellowy bits in there. I feel like maybe the background's just a little too cool and minty. So let's just put this, I'm going to call this a spring green. Let's put some spring green in the background. But again, not everywhere, just a couple places. I like that. And maybe a little in right here, a little bit right there. That was maybe a little too bright, but it's okay. Okay, now I need to stop or I'm gonna overwork it. So, all right, well, once again, thank you everybody. I'm going to zoom in here and show you a little side-by-side of how it turned out. I will also be posting a photo of the completed painting, and this video will be available as a replay, so you can definitely go back, run through the whole thing, and create the painting with me. You can grab the outlines on my website, allykstudio.com. Just look under the paint-alongs under instruction. And once again, thank you guys. Have a great night. Next week, I'm excited. I'm going to be sharing, we are going to paint a peony bouquet. So that's going to be a really pretty one, and I hope that you will join me for that one. All right, guys, have a good night, and I'll see you next week. Happy painting.